And start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We've asked Commissioner Heyman to provide us with a thought or legislative prayer tonight. So, Commissioner.
I actually have both a thought and a prayer. By way of thought, as I was preparing for today's meeting, I was deeply appreciative that the seven of us have different viewpoints and can express those viewpoints, even if we don't always agree, in a respectful way, but in a way that I think creates better policies and decisions for our city. And I ran across a quote by Malcolm Forbes, who is the publisher of Forbes magazine, and he defined diversity as the art of thinking independently together. And I think that that was a really good representation of what we do as a planning commission. And then in the spirit of diversity, I would like to give a Jewish prayer. We pray for all who come here this evening. Although differences in thought and belief divide us, let the desire to serve you, the love of truth, and the pursuit of holiness unite us. Strengthen the spirit of friendship among people of various faiths and increase mutual understanding between us. We look to a time when greater knowledge of you and your word shall bind all who serve you into one holy fellowship, and let us say, Amen.
Amen. Amen. Beautiful, thank you. The next item on the agenda is review of the meeting minutes from our February 8th Planning Commission meeting. So we will go ahead and get started with that. We'll go through the Planning Commission minutes page by page. If you have any comments, please bring them to the attention of the commission. Any comments on page 1? Page 2?
I have two minor comments. The sentence beginning on line 10. If the property remains RM, a single conditional use permit would be issued for the entire subdivision, or individual CUPs would have to be issued for each house built. Is that supposed to be, Corey, that was your sentence. Is it supposed to read single conditional? Is it supposed to be and individual CUPs would have to be issued for each house built, or is that a correct sentence?
The intent is that there's two ways to broach the single-family use in an RM zone. One would be obtain a CUP for the entire subdivision and review it for all 7 of the homes, or the other way would be allow each lot to come in individually for a single-family home, which made lesser of a sense to me at the time. Okay,
so that sentence then is correct. Then the only other comment that I have is on line 14. Just to be consistent, I would capitalize the term city.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on page 2? Page 3? Page 4. Page 5. And page 6. Hearing no further comments, Chair will entertain a motion.
I would move to approve the minutes as amended.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the February 8, 2017 Planning Commission meeting minutes as amended. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? So approved. We're grateful to have some guests join us. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's not that we don't like each other, but we are a few folks short. And we didn't design it to be one chair in between either. It's just the way it worked out tonight. Tell us where you're from.
We're from Centerville, near the Smoot Park area.
Great.
And these are 11-year-old scouts. They're working on their communications in their effects. They want to see how well you communicate.
Well, very good. I'm glad that you're here, and hopefully.
And it's good for the citizenship in the community.
Yes, it is. And we hope we communicate well with you. And if you have anything you'd like to say, we do have a public hearing tonight, so you're welcome to stand up and voice your thoughts. Okay, well, welcome. Grateful to have you here with us. The next item on the agenda, in fact, is our public hearing. It has to do with the general plan text amendment for the Southeast Neighborhood Plan. In this regard, we're considering a proposed general plan text amendment regarding the future residential density allowance in the Southeast neighborhood of Centerville. I'll turn the time over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Hershey, members of the Planning Commission. As you recall, and just by way of refresher and those who are attending the meeting, our southeast neighborhood is the area that is south of Parish Lane and east of Main Street, all the way to the south city limits. And it's that neighborhood that the City Council and Planning Commission previously had some goals to look at revising that neighborhood plan. And some of that revising was to take a look at, very early on, the issue of the Pages Lane commercial area, or the previously known location of the Dick's Market. That was a long-standing goal on what might be done with that area in redeveloping. And then additionally, the issue of recent trends, I think I changed the term to, for multifamily development to be built. And there was certainly in the past, citizens of that southeast neighborhood expressed concerns about the impacts of multifamily development in the and its relation to the single-family neighborhoods. And so together, the Planning Commission, City Council made it a goal for staff to notice the correct public notices to discuss that southeast neighborhood. And we've kind of parsed it into two segments. The first segment would be to discuss the residential neighborhood areas of that and any edits that would be appropriate to think about in the future, what changes and what future plans are for that area of the city, as well as the second half would come after this part. The City Council and Planning Commission would meet in a work session. And I think they're tentatively looking at the night of your second meeting in March for a work session before, tentatively. So I just wanted to bring that up so I could report back to the council on the commission's availability for that.
Actually, maybe you have to break in your presentation just to see what our availability is. I am actually going to be out of town.
Okay.
So Commissioner Hammond would be chairing that night.
I will be available.
Mr. Chair, if you'd like, I could send out to others that are missing and get a report back and then communicate with you on what we should send to the council as a response.
That would be great.
Okay.
Anyone else know for sure whether they've got an issue?
I'll be
that
back
night
by then.
or-
Unless I find somewhere new.
It's your second one,
second
20, what is it, 21st? 22nd?
I believe that Becky Wright will be gone.
Of
I think
March,
she
right?
told us she would be out the entire month of March.
I think I can.
She did.
I'm there.
And you're good, Kathy?
I am.
So I'll reconfirm and then communicate with you, and we can send a response to the council back. Because I think there was also some plans that they were switching some work. So depending on how it all pans out, we may be able to delay it if there's not enough participation.
Okay. Well, I would like to be there if possible, but
Yeah.
I certainly don't want to slow down the process.
So we'll do that, but that will involve the Pages Lane in primarily, but there's also the Main Street area that's involved. But for tonight, you reviewed some very preliminary discussions on some edits for our Southeast Neighborhood Plan. Your previous, it was 2 meetings ago. We've got some responses to some of your input, and I'll just quickly go over the thematic elements of those changes, and then you can discuss the actual edits, which I can bring up on the view for everybody. The first one, as I perceived the discussion, was the issue of medium density residential Now, that medium density residential could be multifamily, that medium density could also be single family. What I gleaned from the commission's discussion is the recognition that in times past, R18, R110 single family zoning is on the low end of a medium density area. And so the commission wanted to recognize that as not only in existence, but also in a future potential. And so we changed the language to call out specifically medium single-family densities into the future. So I didn't address adding in multi-family medium, just the medium single-family densities. The other element was the difficulty of what was previously the old town site of Centerville in its origination as a city, as well as a lot of that area is part of our Dual Creek Historic District. But the boundaries are not necessarily synced on the same lines. And so you wanted to take away the confusion of that, preserve the old town site. And so we changed the language back to the old town site. Then we separated out the Dual Creek District and created its own section in the neighborhood. So the town site will have a section, and then also within the town site, there's also the Dual Creek associated with it. They're fairly similar, but it does keep that distinction between the two. The other area that is, I'm not sure if this was direct, but in notes and thinking and going through the edits, we do have the residential area along our main street that's called the Residential Boulevard. And we had some language that talked about the Centerville Junior High area, the Riviera Townhomes, and then the future, which became the Courtyard. And I revamped that to try to address that this is really part of the Main Street Boulevard of the South Davis Corridor Master Plan, and referenced that this area is also included in that South Main Street Corridor Plan, and used that reference in the code and tried to reformat that section of the neighborhood plan. And then the last one was there was some recognition that we have the East Foothills. The commission raised the concern in general that you wanted to be careful about opening up and addressing foothill development as if it's a definitive in the future. It seemed like that was a concern. And so I went back and said, I think that's important if we're editing the plan to recognize we have some East Foothills in this neighborhood, but rather than try to say what's the future of that area with the neighborhood plan, I then reference back over to the Foothills Management Plan, which has an entire discussion that we're not annexing up the foothills at this time unless certain conditions come available, like a geologic hazard study, the wildland interface issues, the secondary access, how much property is actually usable. And so we just leave, we recognize this area as part of the southeast, there's a portion of it, but we're really leaving the foothills plan to govern the future and not trying to open it up with this edit. So I added that. That was something I think Commissioner Daly had mentioned, and there was those concerns, but I thought that the comment had some merit, so you can either take it or leave it, but I thought it was something that would be important to try to include clarity to. So that's basically the edits that we've made of the plan, and from there, I've just turned it over to you. Questions, clarifications, any additional edits. Hopefully we're a lot better or a lot further along than when we started, but I'll leave it up to you to where you feel comfortable recommending something.
Okay. Thank you very much, Corey. I think the way that we'll want to go through this is to open this up for the public hearing, unless you have some specific questions for Corey on any of the items that he's covered so far. And then after the public hearing closes, we'll open it up to the commissioners for actually suggesting any edits to the text itself. Any objections to that proceeding? Okay, well then, we will open it up for public comment. If there's anyone here tonight that would like to come forward at this time and speak to this issue, you're welcome to do so. We would ask you to come up to one of the microphones. Looks like only one of them has an actual microphone. Seeing no one coming up, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. So, I had just a few edits, but should we just go through this page by page, and if anyone has any comments or questions or edits on any of the text of the proposed change to the general plan, bring those up. Let's start on the first page. I have one comment or kind of a question, and maybe it's just stylistic, on the third paragraph under 12-480-2, where it says, therefore it is the desire of the southeast neighborhood. When I read that, I thought, well, does the southeast neighborhood really have desires, or is it a place?
I had that same question. Should we substitute the word for the southeast
Is the
neighborhood?
general desire for the southeast neighborhood to minimize? Is that the intent, Corey, there? Or?
Yeah, it's speaking to the community's desires, so I treat the community, when I wrote it in the
Or you could say the
tense,
desire of the southeast neighborhood community
yeah,
to minimize. Either way would be fine.
I'm open to,
I think that would define it better.
The southeast neighborhood community?
take out therefore, everything therefore it is.
You
No,
could
but
no.
just after neighborhood, to
Yeah,
add
just
the
put-
word
Just add the
community.
word community after neighborhood. It is the desire of the southeast neighborhood community to minimize housing density conflicts and maintain low. Okay, does that make sense?
Hmm?
Does that make sense to everybody? Anything else on that first page?
I had one suggestion.
Yeah.
So under section 1248-2 in that first paragraph, so right after where it says Pages Lane, where you've added, which is currently experiencing a decline in commercial synergy for the past few years, I would either say which has experienced a decline in commercial synergy for the past few years, or I would say which is currently experiencing a decline in commercial synergy, period.
Either
One
way.
of the two, and I don't really have a preference which.
I like the has, just because these documents go for years. So currently may not necessarily be accurate 2 years from now.
Lisa has persuaded me that the better approach would be to say which has experienced a decline in commercial synergy.
You still want the past few years, or just end
Yeah.
it at commercial
I'm
standard?
fine with for the past few years.
Okay, so I changed it to which has experienced.
Mhm, I think that's
Okay,
fine.
That's mine too.
Any other comments on that first page? Page 2, I have one minor comment. Again, more stylistic than substantive, but under Part B, paragraph 3, where it says, when allowed non-single, excuse me, when allowed non-single family residential and commercial development are to incorporate layouts, designs, and styles or other elements which reflect or are contextually sensitive to the character of this historic district.
Which are, is what you-
Which reflect, rather than reflecting, just to make it
which reflect.
the words consistent, contextually sensitive, and which reflect or are
I see what you're saying,
contextually
yeah.
sensitive.
Yeah, I see that.
Okay? And then on 4, each of the other ones dealing with the prohibition of high residential density development, say it is prohibited. This one is to be prohibited. I'm not sure why we use the future tense there, so I would suggest we just make it consistent and strike the to be.
Okay.
Any concerns or thoughts with any of those edits?
I have 3 additional comments / questions on this page. first comment is I really appreciate the addition of medium density, single-family residential housing. I think that that resolved my concern about limiting it to low-density, single-family housing, which would preclude my neighborhood, for instance. Second question is that in section, well, it's the first subparagraph 3 on this, so it's under what, 1A3, where it says medium or high-density non-single-family residential development is prohibited. I noticed that this is the only instance in which you've called out non-single-family residential development. In every other section where you say medium or high-density development is prohibited, this is the only place where you call out non-single. And I was wondering if there was a purpose behind including it here in the Old Town site and not in any of the other sections.
Well, it is in the Dual Creek section.
The Dual
that Dave
Creek.
just-
Is it in the dual?
The other areas have multifamily, and we're trying to keep the Dual Creek single family.
Okay. That makes sense to me. I just wanted to ask.
Right.
And then the last question is really a ticky-tacky question, and it's just more for my benefit than anything else.
I don't know, I draft this. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm thinking.
On the very last line where it says the residential area immediately around the Centerville Elementary School, I'm just wondering why you added immediately as opposed to just keeping it the residential area around the Centerville Elementary School. Is there a purpose for adding immediately?
It was because the issue that the Centerville Elementary has is we have multifamily running up Parish Lane, and we have a little bit of it extending down to City Hall.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to say that's the area immediately around the school. We want to be limited. I don't know if it constructively well in clarity, I agree with you, but that was the method to the madness, is trying to say we have a really limited area around here that's a completely different zone.
To be more precise, could you use the word adjacent to and surrounding? I mean, is that what you mean by immediately surrounding? Is
Yeah.
it actually touches the school property?
And trailers a little bit, because it trailers up Parish from the school, and it trailers down 100 East.
Well, then we better not say adjacent to, because that might limit it too much.
And then I go further and try to describe in the next page those limited areas. Plus, it also extends on the one side of 100 North.
Right.
I guess when I was reading it, I was wondering, I was trying to get my head around what immediately around the Centerville Elementary School differed from what was just before around it, right? So would you have any objection between that first sentence and where you start a number of duplexes to say, for example?
For example?
To
Yeah.
indicate that by saying that you're talking about immediately around, then give those next
Yeah, that's
set as to suggest that what you're trying to do is illustrate what immediately around is. Yeah.
Yep.
That's what I would do.
That makes sense. Great.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, anything else on?
We could soften it and say the residences surrounding the elementary school.
What if you just said near?
Okay. Near,
In the vicinity.
and
Near
strike
the
out,
Centerville.
and strike out around. Okay,
I mean, it's a very imprecise term, but
it is, but it's also a very weird configurated development pattern.
Okay,
Now just to history, so for clarity, 2 years ago, not 2 years ago, 1 year and 3/4 ago, the previous council made a motion to revisit this RM area in the plan. The new council taking over reversed that directive. So I wrote this plan based on that reversal. The council didn't see at that time a need to place the residential medium in this L shape into a non-conforming status. And so just to be very straightforward, I've taken that as a directive unless otherwise instructed and said we're maintaining that as RM.
thank you, Corey. Next page. should I guess be, is it 15?
I had one on,
Right, well, whatever the next page is, we don't have these numbers, but
it's 3 in this document. Under D, Centerville Junior High area, on line 3, it says the Riviera townhouses needs the word is one of the highest density.
Yes,
Or to take out the and,
or take out the and, yeah.
one of the two.
Let's take out the and, if you're okay with that.
And then the comma. Oh, yeah, okay, if you take out the end. Mhm.
do we need to add a comma after neighborhood, though?
Oh.
Townhouses,
Mhm.
comma,
Mhm.
one of the highest density residential developments in this neighborhood, comma, is located. right?
Yes, correct.
And technically, going on, I don't mean to jump in front of
Oh,
you,
no,
sorry.
fine.
The very next sentence there that you've added, Corey, the developed areas north and east of the junior high are all low-density, single-family. That is not correct. They're all low or medium, single-family, because I live on the street just north of the
I s-
Centerville
I s-
Junior High School.
Yep.
And I am technically a
Yep,
medium-density
that's where we
home.
gets that single-family low, okay, so
Yes,
our low and medium. Good catch. I did not reread that and include that thought pattern.
Take somebody living there to know that.
Good thing.
Good catch. Got to spell medium right, though. There we go.
Anything
And I
else
just
on
had
that?
one more on the very last sentence on that page. New future redevelopment from Porter Lane to Pages Lane is to be done.
Yeah, you probably don't really need the commas, by the way. So, you okay with striking the commas as well?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I did that.
Okay,
So
Very
what was
good.
the change on that one? Were you taking out?
Taking out commas and adding the word be.
yeah,
It's
taking the
to be
commas out of that
done.
last sentence,
Is to be done?
to be done,
Done what? Or maybe,
to be, or
Done
to
in
be in
accordance.
accordance with.
Yeah.
Or to be
Right.
in accordance.
Take out done. Is that correct? Okay.
All right,
The other thing, if you've noticed, and maybe it's the wrong thing, but I tried to, with these new edits, remove the shall issues because of the way the general plan relationship is. And so it has an expectation, but without an ordinance shall.
good. Okay, anything else on that page? We move on to the, I think, last page. Anything on the last page? Okay. Well, thank you again for your good work on this. Let's,
I think it's a much stronger document after our discussions.
let's bring this matter to a vote so that we can send this on. Chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion for the Planning Commission to recommend the general plan amendments of the Southeast Neighborhood Plan as amended in the attachment for this report for
As
the
amended by
following
the
reasons.
commission, is that all right?
Pardon?
As amended by the commission?
As amended by the Planning Commission. As written in this, do I need to read that part? For the following reasons suggested A through F in the report.
I will second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'd just like to add a quick comment that I appreciate the work and the edits that have been done. For me, personally, and in my estimation, I think the general prohibition of high-density housing throughout the language in these edits is something that I don't feel like I can get behind. I know that's a big surprise, and just wanted to make sure that that was voiced before we came to vote. And specifically because I feel like it harms the long-run fiscal sustainability of the city, hampers property rights and development options.
Thank you, Commissioner. I share some of those concerns. I think that there may be other areas in the city, and perhaps even as we approach the somewhat more difficult task of looking at the commercial areas, we'll have an opportunity to revisit that issue as well. I would make one comment on reason D, and wonder if we could add just one word to that, where it says, it's in the example, just after the example parenthetical, it says also falls within the medium density, is it the medium density criteria for residential development? Is that what we're saying? Or do we just want to say falls within medium density for residential development? Either take the out or put criteria in after density.
I'd take the out.
So just take the out. Are you okay with that small change?
Yes, I am.
Any other comment or debate on that motion as amended? Too formally amended. If not, let's go ahead and take a roll call vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Nay.
Aye.
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 It passes. I get to use this one. All right. So this will be recommended to the City Council, and as noted in the staff report, the City Council has the opportunity to modify our recommendation and or start over or do anything else they want to do with it at this point. It is a legislative action. Thank you all for your comments.
And again, I'll report back to the commission on finalization of the work session.
Thank you for coming.
The paragraph on background, you noted November of 2017.
Yeah, that was my autocorrect error. It just plugged in the date for me and I didn't look at it, but thank you.
Thank you.
Boy, they're gonna miss the best part of this meeting.
Yeah, no kidding. I thought that'd stay for the best part. Well, the next item on the agenda is some training by our esteemed and honorable city attorney. Ms. Romney, I'll turn the time over to you.
Great, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I saw that the agenda was a little light tonight, so I thought I'd add the open meetings training. I've already given this training to the Board of Adjustment and the City Council, so we like to try and get these trainings done early in the year. We're required to get them done annually for each body, so we're ahead of schedule. And I also put in your packet, you'll see that the state auditors are now required to check our agendas and our meeting notices and make sure we're complying with the Open Meetings Act. So I put that in your packet. I just thought that was kind of interesting. I was looking on the state auditor's website for something else and came across that. So it's just good to know what they look for. So, so again, we're required annually to have this open meeting training, and I'm trying to keep my presentations to 10 slides, but I could actually only come up with 9 rules, so we only have nine slides. So, and just so you know, I put in the background, this was my trip to Nepal, which is no longer recent. That was back in October and November, so it seems like a long time ago. But
Well, at least you brought the pictures. That's
yes.
Good.
So, and they actually look pretty good up on that that screen.
Really
It was surprisingly green and lush. I really didn't realize it was going to be that green and beautiful, but also quite rugged. Rule number 1, I think, is the most important, and I think one that the Planning Commission takes to heart, but it's always good to remember when you're struggling with decisions to just remember this rule, that that political subdivisions actually exist solely to aid in the conduct of the people's business. And so if you consider that that's why we're here, it just follows and makes sense that all of our decisions and even our deliberations should be open and public so that the public can see how we're struggling over those decisions and why. And so I think the Planning Commission does a good job in stating why they're voting a certain way or discusses the issues, and I think that's great, so the public can see why and how we're making our decisions. So rule number 2, I kind of put these in order of the trip, and so you'll see we're pretty far away. The mountain on the left-hand side is Annapurna 1, Annapurna South, which is the 10th highest peak in the world. So we're right here in Everest. Everest is probably a few hundred miles away. So we'll see that one, and we just keep getting closer and closer and closer. So rule number 2, to remember, all our meetings are open unless we're allowed by law to go into a closed session. Planning Commission doesn't really go into closed sessions, so if and when, I'll probably give you just a little bit more training on that, but there are very few reasons. It might be to discuss the sale or purchase of real property. Sometimes we might come to the Planning Commission for that, or pending or reasonably imminent litigation. We might have gone into a closed session with the Planning Commission when we were dealing with the palm trees. And we also went into the closed session with the Planning Commission when we were dealing with Walmart to talk about security and safety matters. So it does happen, but not very often. Rule number 3 is that we have to have a quorum to conduct our business. So luckily tonight we have 4. That was the magic number. If we don't have 4, we can't have a meeting. Again, I think the Planning Commission is really good to come to these, and you know, I think we make good decisions as a group. My preference is to have as many planning commissioners there. You know, it's wonderful to have all 7 because we have that diversity of all of your opinions. So, number 4 is that agenda items must be listed with reasonable specificity. This was kind of a development in the law, I'd probably say in the last 10 years, where the legislators were saying we need to really put on our agenda what we're going to talk about. We can't just say, you know, business items, miscellaneous items, summary action. It doesn't, you know, if we're doing someone's business, they need to know what we're talking about. So I think we do a good job again, and I like the addition that's been added, that whether it's a legislative or administrative decision, I don't know if that's been helpful for you, but I kind of, you know, I see it and it reminds me, so I think that's been a good addition to our agendas. And we do a great job. I mean, if you look at other cities, but we always name the you know, the address, the applicant, the, you know, what it's being rezoned to and from. And that's where I really like Novus. We don't use it quite as much on the Planning Commission, but on the council, you have 2 lines. You have the subject line, and then you actually have more detail that you can put down below, which I think really helps us get a lot of specificity on our agendas. Okay, rule number 5 is that no action can be taken if an item is not listed on the agenda. Now, this is one of my favorite pictures. It almost looks fake, but that was really a picture, and that's early morning light. So the light wasn't yet on the camp, you know, where we were camping, but just lighting up the mountains. So that one was amazing. So on this, making sure that things are on the agenda before we discuss them, the statute actually says that if someone from the public brings something up, you can talk about it. And this is more applicable for the council because they have the open session. So with the Planning Commission, you know, typically it's preferred to have it listed on the agenda if you want to talk about it. There's a couple reasons for that. One is to let the public know that we're going to talk about it, or to let the applicant or the developer know we're going to talk about it, and also to help staff prepare. You know, if you just bring something up that night and, you know, you want us to respond, we can try and respond off the cuff, but it's nice if you really want a detailed discussion of something to give us notice. I think, go ahead.
Could I ask a question on that? Because sometimes as we're discussing, for example, the Community Development Director's report, something will be on that report that we sometimes ask for a little bit of a historical background so we can kind of be prepared for what we're going to see. we're not taking any action, we're not really debating it. It's more an informational request. Is that a
Yes, and that's what
problem?
I was going to talk about, is kind of, it seems like at the end of our planning commission, now it's an official, I like having it on the agenda, that the community development director is reporting on things, but sometimes a commissioner will ask, okay, well, what's happening with the Walmart signs, or what's happening at, some other In-N-Out burger. And I think that's fine to stay informed and to know the actions that the council has taken. I think that's actually already on our agenda, so it's not an issue. And I think it is legal for you to do that as long as you are not taking any action on it. That's really where the law ends. However, in my opinion, it gets a little dicier if you are talking about an applicant or a pending application. These are the things where I'll say, I think that's not really appropriate for the Planning Commission to be talking about. So, for instance, we don't want to, we talked about something at the last meeting and it's not on this agenda, but it's coming up the next meeting because we tabled it. And then in the interim, when the applicant's not here, we decide to talk about it. That's when I just don't think that's fair when an applicant is waiting, and if the applicant knew you were going to talk about it, they might want to be here. So those are just to keep in mind if there's a pending, be careful.
Situation where looked at something, commission, and we're anticipating it coming back in some form. For example, conceptual.
Chatting back and forth, and so we forget inaccurate. This one. Oh, did I already talk about?
That's been mentioned before, but it expired. Has purchased the property and coming back. Legacy Trail